The Social Media Fire podcast is on the air. Talking all things social media, trends, news, celebrities, and more. It's all fair game. Now, let's go ahead and get the Social Media Fire started. Got a good show here tonight. Couple of big topics on tap with subtopics all underneath them. We'll be talking about social media and how it has changed the game as far as crisis communication. We'll also be talking about celebrities. Celebrities using their platforms, particularly athletes, using their platforms either in social media or out in front in person to make statements on issues that are affecting our country. So let's get it popping. The first topic, how social media has changed the game in crisis communications. You know, when you look at the way social media has changed the game, and make no mistake about it, it really has changed the game as far as the way people are engaging each other and the way people are in a rush to get out information. And social media is such a powerful tool to be able to get that information out to the public in a way in which some outlets, some organizations, for example, police departments, fire departments, mayor's offices, the president's office, they're able to get their messages to the masses, in some cases either in concert with what the media is doing, or in some cases, you might say circumventing what the media is doing. And that indeed is the power of social media these days as compared to what it may have been years ago, where you had to pretty much work through the media to get your messages to the masses. And social media, from a standpoint of reaching the masses, has really leveled the playing field in terms of the engagement between the news makers, the media, and the people that want to receive the news. So you don't have to necessarily rely as much on the media, the newspapers, the TV, the radio stations. More and more we have citizen journalists who are using social media to get the word out about things that are important to them. Of course, if you talk to some of our brothers and sisters in TV and radio, television, they will tell you that they, as the traditional media, or the mainstream media, as some people refer to it now, they're the ones that have the credibility. They're the ones that have the reputation, the professionalism to be able to go out and not only to develop their sources, but to work their sources, to be able to confirm information, to be able to bring to the public's attention information that is accurate, that has been well vetted, that is confirmed. But then, you have citizen journalists using social media, using the web. They have been able to get their information out. And in some cases, you have people who used to be journalists in the traditional sense of the word and the profession, striking out on their own, yet still reporting the news. They've brought a different element to the media. And then you have social media, where if you have a certain level of name recognition, that puts you out there at the forefront. Then, if you get the little verified sign next to your name, it gives you even more credibility in the eyes of some people. Twitter in particular, they don't just hand those verified check marks out quite so easily. You got to work hard to earn those, or you got to have great name recognition, or maybe you get a little bit lucky. I don't know. It depends on who you ask. But when you look at social media now, you can see that a lot of people are looking to social media right away when they say, where am I going to get my news from? Are they going right to the television station like they used to? 30 years ago, you had CBS, you had NBC, and you had ABC. And then some people in the 80s, they got cable. That's when we got cable at our house in Detroit. Looking at a poll here from Statista.com. In 2016, 78% of U.S. Americans had a social network profile, representing a 5% growth compared to the previous year. According to estimates, the number of worldwide social media users reached 1.96 billion and is expected to grow from there. So you can see that social media is where it's at. Looking at the Pew Research Center website, 65% of adults now use social networking sites, a nearly tenfold jump in the past decade. This article, written by Andrew Perrin, dated October 8th, 2015, nearly 2/3 of American adults use social networking sites, up from 7% when Pew Research Center began systematically tracking social media usage in 2005. And it really has changed the game. You can see more and more people are getting their information via social media. And in many cases, when you're on social media, you're already going to be there anyway. So you've come home from work or you've come home from school, you're unwinding at night. And in some cases, even during the day, checking your social media site to see where the news is going to be broken first. And you have some newspapers who want to continue to make sure their sales of their hard copies remain strong. They want to make sure that their websites are generating revenue so they can keep going. And that's really one of the biggest changes in the media over the existence of what we think of as the news media, with newspapers and then radio stations and then TV stations all reporting the news, followed by the internet, followed by social media. That's all changed the game in terms of where people are getting their information. So back to the Pew Research Center, a different article right here. This one dated May 26, 2016, so just a few months ago, written by Jeffrey Gottfried and Elisa Shearer. A majority of U.S. adults, 62%, get news on social media, and 18% do so often, according to a new survey by Pew Research Center conducted in association with the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. In 2012, based on a slightly different question, 49% of U.S. adults reported seeing news on social media. So if you're not using social media and you're a member of the media and you haven't figured out how to leverage yourself in social media as an individual, or if you're a company, if you're a media outlet and you haven't figured out how to properly leverage social media to get the word out to your viewers, to your listeners, to your readers, you're like the dinosaur sitting looking up at the sky and waiting for the comet to wipe you out. You're like the dinosaur that knows that the comet is coming, knows where it's going to hit, and you're standing there looking at it thinking that no, it can't possibly hit us and take us out. But it is going to take you out. And you had a chance to move and get out of the way to maybe save yourself, but you didn't because you were stubborn. 62% get their news on social media, and 18% do so often. That's substantial, especially for newspapers that are still relying on their print editions to generate revenue, to get the word out about what's going on in communities. And some older people who maybe aren't quite as connected with social media are relying on their daily newspapers. They're relying on their TV stations. TV stations that'll jump in and give them the breaking news when they need it, where they need it, how they need it. Some newspapers that have their website behind a pay firewall, they're challenged. They want to be able to leverage social media, but they don't want to give away their content for free via social media when they're trying to get sales on their print edition that's coming out the next morning or the next afternoon, depending on if you're a morning or afternoon paper or evening paper. And so therein lies a conflict that many newspapers are dealing with these days. And it's a very real conflict. So you have social media where you can literally break news right when it happens. And not only can you break news, but you can actually engage with your audiences. So you've not only broken the news, but you have a chance to talk to your audience right there. Your audience has an opportunity to talk amongst themselves right there, literally as news is breaking. They're able to offer their commentaries as news is breaking. It's fluid. So people are going to make mistakes. People are going to have crazy opinions. People are going to have rational opinions. People are going to have opinions that are not based on real facts. People are going to have opinions that are based on facts. And it's all part of what makes social media great, and yet what can make it maddening to people. How many times have you seen a situation pop off and people are in social media and they run right to their laptop, they run right to their mobile device, their phone, their iPad, their Fire, Kindle Fire, their whatever, their Nook, their whatever, their phone, and they are all on it. They're going right to Twitter, getting their opinions, looking for the trending topics, looking for the big hashtags that are out there so they can jump in on the conversation. We saw it a few years ago with Ferguson. I would imagine one of the most used hashtags for a while, maybe ever. I mean, that was a huge hashtag a few summers back with the killing of Michael Brown at the hands of Darren Wilson, a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, outside of St. Louis. From that sprung another big hashtag in social media, Black Lives Matter, which prompted All Lives Matter from some critics of Black Lives Matter, which prompted Blue Lives Matter from people who are pro law enforcement and are critical of Black Lives Matter. As we know, everything becomes politicized in some way, shape, or form. Even things that are done with good intentions become politicized. It's just the way we are in our society. But we rush to judgment. Some of us do so carefully. Some of us do so not so carefully. So the question becomes, who polices what's happening in social media? The reality is that we have to self-police. We have to police each other. If you're a social media manager from an organization that's under attack, you feel falsely so, what are your options? Do you go at the people who are spreading misinformation, half-truths? Do you, in fact, become PolitiFact and declare whether something is true, mostly true, false, mostly false, pants on fire false? Do you engage in people who are spreading misinformation? Do you challenge them with the correct information, the accurate information, the in context information? Or do you let them shoot their mouth off? I was working with a group during some social media training that I was co-hosting. And I always use the analogy when you get into an argument as someone who's managing a brand, it's like wrestling with a pig in the mud. You both get muddy and the pig likes it. You maybe don't like it quite so much, but the pig loves it. So when someone's coming at you as a brand in social media, you have to look at it as a risk-reward situation. The risk of engaging with someone who just wants to yell at you. The risk of engaging someone who just likes to argue with you. I'll give you an example. While running a brand page on Twitter, I had someone who came and left a hate comment. Not a hate comment like a death threat or anything like that, but left an angry, critical comment that didn't really make any sense. And I decided I was going to respond to this person. So I typed up a response to put what this person said into the proper context so that it was accurate, that it made sense. Checked it, double checked it. Felt like I was in the right, that what I was going to do was rational, fair, reasonable. And I was just getting ready to hit the send button, and then something occurred to me. And this was several years ago. Pre-enlightenment relative to how to handle critical people, angry people in social media as a manager, as an administrator for a brand. And as I looked at this person's Twitter feed, it just blew me away. This person literally, as I went through their Twitter feed, they had nothing, maybe at least 10 to 20, maybe even more than that, all complaints taking shots at a variety of different brands. And I sat there and I was so glad that I did not hit the send button. Because this is a guy who wants to draw you into a fight. He probably knows he's wrong. He probably knows he's not well researched. And actually, he probably doesn't expect you to respond to him. In fact, I would imagine that most times, if you're a brand, people probably tend to not think that you're going to respond or you're going to come back at them in some way, shape, or form. And certainly, they don't expect you to come back at them in an aggressive type of fashion. Sometimes you do, as a brand manager. Sometimes you don't. It all depends. Is there something to be gained? If you have an angry person that just wants to fight with you, even if you make a good point, they're not going to care. Because they're just pissed off. And they just want to vent. But every once in a while, particularly on Facebook, maybe more so than Twitter, at least that's my experience, others may differ. Facebook, you can sometimes spot the person that just has a criticism because of a perception. But if you show them the truth, you enlighten them, so to speak, it changes their perspective. These are the reasonable people. But as many of you know who have run a brand page and are put in these situations where you have to respond to someone, they're not always that reasonable. In fact, many times they can be pretty damn unreasonable. In fact, in many times, as I said on Twitter, they can be out there looking for a fight. They want to drag you in. They want to troll you in to a fight just for a battle. I remember one time when I was early in my career running as a social media manager and running a brand. I remember getting into it with a person who, at the end of the little exchange of Twitter messages, I can't remember exactly what the person said, but it was something like, "Oh, this was fun." They got into a little beef and they drew us in, us, I'm using air quotes, which was me representing us. And they got what they wanted. They had a little fun at our expense. So it was a lesson learned. And fortunately, it wasn't a hard lesson to learn, but it was a lesson to learn. One of the things about social media is that social media sort of levels the playing field in that you, as an individual, you may not have the audience that a brand has, that a celebrity has, but you can still make a point, and your point can catch fire. And to some extent, put you on a plateau that's, even if it's just for one tweet, one instance in your existence, it can put you right there with a celebrity. It can put you right there with a brand, especially if they respond to you, if they open the door and give you an opportunity to step in. This is the power of social media and how it has changed the game. But back toward the original topic, which is how social media has changed the game in crisis communication. We saw recently in the shootings in Dallas of the police officers, and we've seen in other situations where the police departments have opportunities to go right to the public, and they don't necessarily have to go to the media. They don't necessarily have to hold a press conference. They can use their Twitter account. They can use their Facebook page to talk right to people. And in many cases, if they've done it right and they've run their social media right, they can have a very, very, very powerful voice. You know, these hashtags linked to causes, as I mentioned with All Lives Matter, police, or people who are sympathetic to the police with Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, which got it all started. Hands Up, Don't Shoot. That was another big one, as I mentioned. These hashtags have helped make Twitter so powerful. And you think about how powerful Twitter is. You know, increasingly, you look at these programs. Like, for instance, I'm a big sports guy. And you look at ESPN, and on the lower third, the name key, they'll often have the Twitter handle under it. You see often on broadcasts of SportsCenter and other sports shows where they show tweets from athletes who are commenting on things that are happening, big things that are happening in the news. It shows you how far social media has come. Athletes are tweeting and getting their points out, sometimes controversially so. We've seen colleges and universities trying to, in some cases, monitor what their athletes are saying. In some cases, trying to manage what their athletes are saying. In some cases, trying to censor what their athletes are saying. Which segues into our next topic, celebrities taking a stand via social media. With Black Lives Matter becoming so big, particularly with the recent shootings of Philando Castile in Minnesota and Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Goes back also to Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Eric Garner out in New York. Tamir Rice, Cleveland. Trayvon Martin, Florida. These and many other incidents have prompted people to really throw their weight behind Black Lives Matter. Now, Black Lives Matter, somehow it changed from maybe being a spontaneous movement, and it became more of a sort of an organization / movement. But whatever it's become, the hashtag is huge. And the hashtag has become big. It's become a symbol for even some celebrities, as we've seen many professional athletes, not many, I take that back. We've seen an increasing number of professional athletes using their platform as professional athletes / celebrities to either get the conversation going, to keep the conversation going, or to elevate the conversation. We saw LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade at the ESPYs making a stand for what's going on in terms of shootings involving police and the African American community or the black community. That certainly sparked a lot of attention in social media. A lot of people really getting on board, and I, for reasons I won't get into, I decided I wasn't going to watch the ESPYs this year. But then again, as I was on social media, I became aware of what was going on with these four NBA superstars and the stand that they took in support of the concerns that people in the black community have about police shootings and about violence. And the social media was just blowing up. A lot of people, happy about what these professional athletes were doing. Carmelo Anthony in particular has been one of the guys leading the way on this and challenging his fellow professional athletes to, in a sense, put their money where their mouth is. Challenging them to step up, to do something for their communities. To speak for those who can't speak out loud. To give a lift to those who are downtrodden. To give power to those who feel powerless. A little bit more recently, currently, what's been in the news is some players in the WNBA who have made a stand relative to Black Lives Matter some of the WNBA players were protesting. They were you and I. Sorry about that. I had a commercial playing in the background as I went to the ESPN website. Tried to stop it, but hey, ESPN's got to pay their bills too. The WNBA, actually reading the article right now, the WNBA has withdrawn its fines for teams and players that showed support of citizens and police involved in recent shootings by wearing black warm-up shirts before games. Again, this is an article from WESPN.com.
Limited the Indiana Fever, and last night the Washington Mystics put forth a statement where they essentially said, because of the violence in this country and some of the stands they want to take, that if you want to talk to us about basketball-related issues, it's off the table. If you want to talk to us about social issues, we will. The two teams, the Liberty and the Fever, took that particular stance because they came out in warm-ups one day with the words, Black Lives Matter. That is a violation of the WNBA's uniform conduct policy, and as a result, those two organizations were fined for the players that wore those Black Lives Matter t-shirts. However, today the WNBA has rescinded that fine. This is obviously a hot-button issue all across America. Here's the statement from the WNBA president, Lisa Borders, on the rescission of those fines. All of us at the WNBA have the utmost respect and appreciation for our players expressing themselves on matters important to them. While we expect players to comply with league rules and uniform guidelines, we also understand their desire to use their platform to address important societal issues. Given that the league will now be suspending play until August 26th for the Olympics, that's right, they'll be off for about a month, we plan to use this time to work with our players and their union on ways for players to make their views known to their fans and the public, and we have informed the players that we are rescinding the recently imposed fine. So that is a very new development with the WNBA players speaking out well after the NBA players have chosen to do the same on issues regarding societal violence that have all affected us here recently.
So, an interesting development right there. There was some controversy because it was perceived after the shooting of members of the LGBTQ community in Orlando that the WNBA had been more comfortable with that support that was given to people following that tragedy, but felt like there was some hypocrisy in terms of this particular situation. Really good article about ESPN, from ESPN. Here's a quote from Isaiah Thomas, president of the New York Liberty. He says, "We commend Lisa Borders for recognizing how the players of the WNBA felt and the sensitive time that we're living in and being willing to reevaluate their decision. We are also very proud of our players. The world is seeing what they already knew. They're truly incredible, thoughtful, and talented individuals. Our league, our partners, and our society are better because of their willingness to enter political and social activism arena." And so you can see, even if you go into social media, many of the athletes in question were using their platform to really push out the things that they were saying. And I saw, for example, I stumbled across some great tweets out from members of the Seattle Storm franchise. And I'm just sitting here looking at a tweet right now from WNBA Prez, that's at WNBA Prez. "Appreciate our players expressing themselves on matters important to them. Rescinding imposed fines to show them even more support." Now, we'll see what happens. You heard at the end of the segment on ESPN that they're going to use the Olympic break to, I guess, reevaluate the way that the players are approaching these types of activism situations. So it could be some interesting things that could happen there. We'll see what happens after the Olympic break, what happens with the WNBA and how they work with the players to find maybe a happy medium between what the players want to do to use their platform to get the word out about things that are bothering their community versus the sensitivities of the WNBA as an organization, knowing that they have to work with the police, but they also have to work with members of the minority communities that are feeling affected by recent incidents that have happened involving the police and citizens. So lots of things going on there. And again, you can see the ability of people to use social media. Here, the WNBA president tweets this about 6 hours ago. And again, this is the WNBA, so not the NBA, not to be disparaging to the WNBA, but 1.4, so 1,400 retweets, 1,500 likes. So again, that message, because of social media, gets out to a lot of people. And certainly, I'm sure they appreciate the support that they're getting in terms of getting the message out from ESPN. But again, social media allows you to go directly to the affected people or to the interested people. It allows you to craft the messages you want instead of having your message go through the filter of the media to get to the audiences that you're trying to reach. Again, the power of social media. Another big issue as we wrap up here this episode is the NBA All-Star Game. So the NBA made a decision about the All-Star Game, the mid-season classic that was scheduled to take place in Charlotte, North Carolina this coming season in early 2017. As going to a story here on CNN Money. The NBA's decision to pull its All-Star Game out of Charlotte means an estimated loss of $100 million to the city's economy. The NBA pulled the All-Star Game out of Charlotte because of the state's so-called bathroom law. If you know, this has to do with the use of restrooms by transgender people who were going to be able to use the bathroom with the gender for which they identify. So the CNN Money article goes on to say the controversial law prevents cities from creating non-discrimination policies based on gender identity and mandates that students in state schools use the bathroom that corresponds with the gender on their birth certificate. A number of performers, including Bruce Springsteen, Maroon 5, and Pearl Jam, have canceled concerts in North Carolina as a result of the legislation. So this is the NBA looking at this situation and saying, you know what? We have to take a stand. And I saw some people, or one YouTuber who actually, I think he made the video on his Facebook page. Maybe he put it on his YouTube channel as well. And he was talking about some of the hypocrisy of how the NBA took a stand against North Carolina because of its legislation that it felt was anti-LGBTQ, particularly transgender. But then the WNBA coming down hard on athletes who were expressing support for Black Lives Matter. Now, of course, as we just talked about, the WNBA has since rescinded the fines that they had levied against the players who they had initially said violated rules through their support of Black Lives Matter, and as well as their support of the police officers who were just senselessly slaughtered by people who just are just terrible and sick individuals. But you know, this move by the NBA to take the All-Star Game away from Charlotte became a big story. And a lot of people having a big conversation in social media. And I was looking at some quotes right now. One tweet right here from Black Sports Online, that's at BSO. NBA, who finances the WNBA, took the All-Star Game away for inequality, while the WNBA is finding players standing up for equality. And it's got a emoji with a yellow face with the hand on the chin, as if to say, And so, again, since that time, the WNBA has sort of done a reversal, full-scale reversal, to perhaps right that wrong, if you want to look at it that way. A lot of people in social media land really supporting the NBA. I'm sure a lot of people are also quite negative about this, as I've read some people who are really upset with the NBA, but also some people who are upset with the state of North Carolina. And of course, the NBA could always come back and bring the All-Star game back to North Carolina should they make some adjustments to what they're doing as relative to the transgender community. Now, whether that'll happen or not, who knows? But certainly Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, has made a pretty bold, loud statement. Governor of North Carolina is really upset with the NBA. Looking at some tweets there talking about that. Difficult situation for the Charlotte Hornets franchise, and opportunity for them to be a showcase for the NBA, for them to showcase the city of Charlotte, indeed the state of North Carolina, through the NBA All-Star game. And certainly a big economic drain on North Carolina. Again, that estimate is $100 million lost for the state of North Carolina, the city of Charlotte. And again, a lot of commentary in social media, a lot of opinions, and you can see how the opinions have evolved. I read the one tweet where they were talking about the fines of the WNBA players, sort of contradicting what the NBA is doing, taking a stand for the LGBTQ, particularly the T in the LGBTQ, while the WNBA players were being fined. And so social media, again, is a way that fans can have their voices heard, which is another way that the players can make their voices heard, even if they had been silenced, even if they could be silenced after the Olympic break. They still have the social media platforms that they can use to really get the word out about their causes that they feel are important. And again, one thing about Black Lives Matter is we saw not just black players in the WNBA, but white players as well, speaking out very strongly in favor of Black Lives Matter. So that's really a powerful statement. Again, I saw a lot of tweets from people out there in social media, and the big tweet, the big hashtag out there was, "We will not be silenced." And that was in reference to not feeling forced to go sit in the corner and not be able to speak what you want to say. Now, my favorite women basketball player of all time, Sue Bird of the Seattle Storm, she quoted Dr. Martin Luther King on this tweet dated July 22nd, so a couple days ago. "There comes a time when silence is betrayal." And she's got hashtag "We will not be silenced," hashtag Black Lives Matter. And it also shows why, in fact, social media does in fact matter. Because these players, and it wasn't just Sue Bird, it were many of her teammates, other players around the WNBA, using their considerable platforms to make their voices heard. And while this show, Social Media Fire, discusses how social media factors into these movements, it's also important that they backed what they were saying in social media up with actual deeds in real life. And so that strengthens what they're saying in social media, and vice versa. What they're doing in social media strengthens what they're doing physically, in person, in real life. So that's going to do it for this episode of Social Media Fire, the podcast Social Media Fire. In our next podcast, we'll talk about a number of topics, including Twitter battles, targeting people on social media, particularly on Twitter. We'll talk about YouTube battles, and we'll talk about a lot more on the next edition of Social Media Fire, the Social Media Fire podcast. Thank you for listening to this Social Media Fire podcast. Please download, share, like, and otherwise spread the word about Social Media Fire. Stay tuned for the next podcast of Social Media Fire.